Hello, welcome to the very first edition of the Treehouse Comics podcast. My name's Neil Scott, and joining me today we have
Stuart McAdam.
And from Dundee,
David Robertson.
And from Camlin,
John Adam.
Great, thanks for joining us, guys. Sorry if this is a little bit awkward to the listeners. This is the first time any of us have recorded a podcast, so we'll just take it as we go. Okay, guys, so to start off with, is there any comics news, any exciting events or any exciting books that have just come out that you guys are interested in?
Well, I was actually going to ask you guys if you'd heard about anything to do with, apparently Image Comics are getting, sort of indie titles from America are getting a bit of, they've not been shipped this week, apparently. So there's a bunch of titles which I was waiting to get, which haven't come overseas, and I wonder if you guys knew anything about.
I haven't heard anything about that.
So basically, was it Nowhere Men number 8 is coming out this week, and I've been waiting for that a lot, and then I tried to buy it, and it just wasn't there, and I can't get it anywhere, it seems, so I'm wondering if, apparently, there's something about shipping or weather or something, which has caused a bit of a delay, but there you go.
A storm has sucked up all of Image Comics.
Yes, exactly.
Perhaps forever.
Well, I hope not. But that's a good one. And yeah, Nowhere Men has started up again after a 2.5-year hiatus. So first 6 issues were some of the best things that I've read in years. Like, it was great. Each issue was it's like a comic from a complete other reality, because there's no adverts in it or anything. It's all interviews with characters from it, like The Watchmen, that kind of thing. It's all everything in between the stories is either more information about the characters or the world they're in, or adverts for companies from in the comic and so on. And it was a very in-depth, really interesting read about the development of like supernatural powers in the future and things. It's really good.
Yeah, I've heard of it. I've not read it, but I've heard about it. So it's like a sort of self-contained universe within each issue of the book.
Yeah,
I think it was you that telling me about it, John. Actually, yeah.
I know it's fantastic. Like, there's loads of different levels to it as well. You've got like a kind of Beatles style. Guys who started a science company in the 80s, and it's set in this reality where science is the new rock and roll, and then it's got their point of view, and it's got them when they were starting the company, and then now it's got like 3 or 4 storylines on top of each other, but it's just started up now, and there's lots of good stuff going on with it. So this new run of it with Dave Taylor drawing it now instead of the original guy whose name I can't remember, who did like Batman, Death by Design and things like this. So some really nice artwork in it as well.
Chip Kidd.
Yeah, what's that?
Was that Chip Kidd?
Dave Taylor.
Yeah. What am I thinking about? Chip Kidd.
What's Chip Kidd done?
Something about Batman with design.
Okay.
Anyway,
Chip Kidd drawing something about Batman with designs in it.
Yeah, you can tell I was paying attention.
Latest from DC. Fair enough. Well, hopefully
someone will know what I'm talking about. Yeah.
Hopefully that weather event has not destroyed all copies of Nowhere Men, so you can actually read that, John. We'll be interested to hear what you thought.
Yes, I would like to get it.
How about you, David? Anything on the horizon that's caught your eye?
I did just see Zap Comics that's been going since the 60s with Robert Crumb and all those guys. And they've done one every so often for 30 odd years. There's a new one, Zap 16, that had come out with this humongous box set that cost hundreds of dollars to buy. But now they're bringing out that latest issue as a standalone thing you can buy. So, that was really collector mentality gone wild, because you can still pick up all those issues. They're endlessly reprinted, so you could go and get Zap number 1 for hardly anything. Or you could buy this £500 set with all of them in it.
Yeah, that seems to be a thing that Fantagraphics is doing a lot of at the moment. I just saw recently there's a big box set of women's comics, as in women's, WIMMINS, the comic itself, not just generic women's comics. But they've just released a big, I don't know if it's completely exhaustive of all the back issues, but it certainly seems pretty huge. And that looks really good. So I don't think it's going to be £500 though. Thankfully.
How can they justify that much for like a collection like that though? That's, I don't know. Has it got 500 pages in it? I don't know.
They're aiming at a very specific market, aren't they? Of people with a bit too much money, and also I guess it gives it some kind of status to have it all as a big fancy item like that. But then with those kind of comics, that's going against what they're about, really. You know, the undergrounds and all that.
Yeah.
Half of their charm is that they're newsprint, you know, things that were just put together.
Mm-hmm.
So this new issue of Zap,
yeah,
16 or 17, whatever it is.
16, yeah.
16.
Yeah.
Is this still all the old crew, all the old fogies, basically from the?
Yes, it is. Yeah,
are just still in production.
The ones that are still alive and kicking, yeah. So they're all in there. And you know,
is it still basically spearheaded by Crumb? Is he kind of at the helm?
Yeah, he's still in it. I think there's various levels of twisting his arm to get him to do anything for it. So I don't know how involved he is, but he's been in all of them, certainly. In fact, one of the last ones I read, it was all the other guys in Zap were kind of doing a story where they were all annoyed at Crumb because he was refusing to put something in. So it was quite an amusing read. And then, of course, he did put something in. So, yeah, it was good.
A rebuttal. It's the perfect forum to air all your grievances, isn't it? In a comic book format, you can just have a go at everybody else in the anthology because it's been going for that long. Hopefully, Treehouse will get to that stage at one point. We won't speak to each other. We'll just attack each other in comics form.
David, you're first in the firing line.
yeah, bring it on.
I would love to see a comics flame war between David and Stuart from issue to issue. That would be ideal, absolutely ideal. Oh, man. Okay. What about you, Stuart? Anything you've been looking at recently?
Well, I heard that this Dundee-based collective are releasing their new issue on Wednesday.
Oh, a shameless plug. Shameless plug.
No, to be honest, I've been a little out of the loop the last little while, and I don't really follow the image stuff like you're saying, John. Yeah. So I was checking out. I can't remember the name of the guy, but I was reading about Slow Comics the other day in the Herald. It was their graphic novel of the week. It looks pretty cool and sort of tapping into these ideas of slowness within cinema. What else, and food and all
TV's
that.
TV's a big thing, isn't it? I don't know if you saw it at Christmas. There was like a slow TV thing on the BBC. There was just a reindeer sled ride that lasted for 4 hours through the north of Norway. It was really, I loved it. It was basically somebody strapped a GoPro to the side of a reindeer, and it went for 4 hours basically through this journey, stopping off at various points along the way through a snowy Arctic wilderness. But it was
this on?
It was the best thing I watched on the whole of Christmas, I think.
Was that on TV? You were saying, yeah?
It was on the television, broadcast television.
But in Norway, you're saying it was a Norwegian thing. In Norway, they screened a 17-hour. No, it wasn't 17 hours, but it was like the full journey between somewhere like Oslo and Stavanger.
Right. On a ferry?
No, they did a ferry one, but there was a train journey as well.
Okay.
There was quite a few.
Yeah, it's like a slow TV kind of movement that's happened, I suppose. Yeah. It's become insanely popular in Nordic countries, just with a chance to, I suppose, have an experience that isn't throwing things at you constantly through its editing and through its storyline and narrative. It's just it's almost like a screensaver, but one that takes in the majesty of nature.
Yeah. I think I've watched one of them on YouTube, the train one certainly, and you know, it kind of at first you get a bit restless because we're so used to lots of information bombarding us all the time, and then you sort of relax into it, and it just sort of takes over, and then you realise that 45 minutes has passed. And I don't think I watched the entire thing, but you know, I certainly watched a good chunk of it.
So in terms of the comic, I wonder how that's going to work, because obviously with a comic, the pace is not defined by the author as much as it is by the reader. Oh, to some extent.
See exactly, because in the article what it was saying was that you could read it in 40 minutes or whatever, but one of the page excerpts was a guy looking at a painting. And it was all the sort of gestures and, sort of... So you're kind of... I think what it was trying to say, or, you were trying to be in that and observe that. So you're observing the observer, and it becomes a kind of thing that you're looking at moments, you're looking at the action that is actually not... like, if you think about it, the other side of it with a superhero comic being the sort of only the action, this is almost like the opposite.
Oh, okay. That's interesting, because I was reading Scott McCloud's Understanding Comics a while back, and what you're saying about sort of the pacing of comics and things like that, and he was saying about the Eastern influence on American comics and the sort of slow I don't know, the more time taken to show setting in a lot of these kinds of comics. And I was thinking, is there a lot of that in this slow comics thing? Like sort of more, I don't know, just general shots of surroundings and moments and things like this. Is there some of that in these as well?
Well, I don't know, maybe David, you'll remember this more than I really do anyway, but there was a Wolverine comic, I'm sure it was, and they had, there was a big uproar about it because they basically did some kind of, it was like a defragmented sort of moment by moment over about 10 pages, and people were getting a bit irritated by the fact that nothing was happening, and something like that. That must have been like maybe 10, 15 years ago.
I have no memory of that whatsoever.
Oh, okay, fair enough.
But I guess they would get annoyed because he hadn't sliced anybody for 10 pages or so.
Yeah.
Well, I'm reminded of the kind of things Seth would do.
Mm-hmm.
He would have nice pictures of, the scenery and just to create a mood, and that could go on for a few pages.
Yeah.
That was nice. So if it's anything like that,
I've just brought something up on the computer here while you guys are talking because it reminded me of it. I couldn't remember the name of the author, but it's a guy called Richard Maguire who's published, I think it was last year it came out, but it's called Here. I'm sure you guys have seen. It's one of those ones that's in all the Waterstones and bookshops and stuff. It's kind of a big, hefty hardback thing. But it's I've not bought it, but I've looked through it and I would like to get it at some point because that's, I guess, around a similar sort of idea. Have you seen this, Stuart?
No, I've not seen this one.
It's basically, it takes place, the sort of conceit of it is that it's a single physical place, but it moves through time. So there's this one geographical point that the author has chosen. And then as you read through the book, you're kind of flipping pages, and then the place doesn't move. The camera point, if you like, the sort of the point of view doesn't change, but the time period changes. And this goes all the way from prehistoric, like primeval forests, right up to modern era. And then within a single page, there'll be different panels overlaying on top of each other, which show different points in time. And it kind of, I guess the effect as you read through it is you're getting the full extent of history within this one very small sort of place.
It's the kind of,
like I said, I haven't read the whole thing. I've looked through it, and it looks really good, and it's beautifully drawn. The guy's primarily a sort of a visual artist rather than a comics artist, but he's produced this kind of wonderful graphic novel, and that sort of sounds similar to the type of thing you're talking about.
I've just shown you that picture there as well.
I see you mean. It's just like, that's more like the moment to moment. This guy's looking at a painting, and it's just a very small, kind of incidental, mundane little gestures, kind of like you see in a Chris Ware comic as well.
Exactly.
Comic, well, Chris Ware's he's kind of championed this book by Richard Maguire. He's written essays about it, and I think there was, in an old issue of Raw back in the 80s, Richard Maguire had done a few page kind of comic based around this idea, which is now fleshed out into this full graphic novel. And apparently a young Chris Ware actually saw this this piece in Raw by Richard Maguire, and it had a really big impact on the way he was thinking about comics, because you'll see that sort of stuff in Chris Ware's, particularly in the stuff in building stories. Like he layers up these different points in time on top of each other within a building in his case. But the
one that I'm talking about is called Hubert, if anyone wants to look
at it. Is that the name of the slow comics
that's the name of
you're talking about?
Yeah. It's by Ben Keismans.
Just talking about time in comics, I just wanted to, this actually ties into what we're going to talk about in a minute, in a second, but in Island Comics, another Image title, which Brandon Graham, who's done loads of stuff, he started off doing sort of more adult comics, and then he's doing the Prophet stuff, and now he's doing this Island thing with Emma Rios, where the two of them, I'm pretty sure it's Emma Rios, and the two of them are taking indie sort of small comics, kind of like a compilation kind of thing, kind of like what Treehouse is doing as well, but there's some really nice uses of time in these as well. There's one comic, I can't remember the names of them off the top of my head, I'm afraid. I can if we're putting notes, I can write them in, but there's one called, what's it called again? I've completely forgotten the name of it. Anyway, there's one which is about, it's taken from the point of view of people in a queue to get into a club, and it's like the story about each of them in relation, so each of them sort of turns out that they know a similar person and things like this. But the use of panels to show time in that's really interesting, because it's all done to the beat of the music in the club.
Okay.
So you maybe have like it's a 9-panel page layout. So you have like 3 panels, and then the 4th panel is broken into 4, and then 3 more again and then broken into 4. So it's meant to be, you know, how does it feel? So it's that kind of dum dum do 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 do.
Okay, that kind of do you find yourself reading to the beat as it goes?
Yeah, exactly. So you're reading it, but it's the way that the 4 panels are broken up. It's like a shot of someone mid-dance, then mid-dance, then mid-dance, and then it's like 4 shots, almost like a film reel kind of passing in that short space of time. So it's the same kind of drawing, but ever so slightly different for those 4, and then it changes again. And it's just a really interesting use of paneling to predict sort of time change and stuff. Good. Island Comics is great though. There's another one in there, and I can't remember the name of it for the life of me, but it's one of the best sci-fi books I've read in like years and years and years.
I remember seeing that. So it's basically an anthology. Is it edited by Brandon Graham, or is he just part of it?
It started off and edited by those two, Brandon Graham and Emma Rios, I think it is. But at one point, it's actually the issue that was edited by, like, not edited by Brandon Graham, which has the most interesting stuff in it. And I'm gutted I can't remember the name right now, but it's... so
fuck Brandon Graham, basically, that's what you're saying?
Essentially, yes. That's it. That's where I'm going. But no, just Prophet stuff he's done is great. But I have to say that just with Island, the comics that he goes for, I don't totally agree with all the time. But the ones that this other guy's come in with are spot on. Just this one issue, it was like 4 or 5 back to back, just great wee stories as well. Cool.
All right, sounds good. Well, there's one book that I've been thinking about, apart from that women's comics one, which I just saw the other day that looks pretty cool. Is a new one out from Drawn and Quarterly by Brian Chippendale. I don't know if you guys.
Oh yeah, Lightning Bolt.
Yeah, one half of Lightning Bolt.
Yeah.
But his comics he's really good. He's part of that Fort Thunder group, but he's got a new book called Puke Force.
Awesome.
Which is a good name.
Yeah.
It's apparently it's a web comic, but it's been collected into a really nice book format. You should check out the cover design because it's great. It's like neon pinks and greens, and it's got this really sort of dense cartooning style, which I like a lot. It's sort of a satirical, post-apocalyptic take on Midwestern America, but it's got a robot character called Gregus Great GameCube, which is enough to sell me on the book by that alone. So so I'm going to try and pick that up at some point. He's a really interesting guy. Lightning Bolt is. I'm sure you like it, John. It's kind of up your street, but
they're one of my top 5 bands.
I find it an overwhelming experience listening to it, but I do like it.
I read an interview with Brian Chippendale where he was talking about his drumming and his comics, and he's talking about he's got this similar theory for the two of them, where it's that he's just about filling space. Where with his drumming, he plays so fast and plays everything all at the same time, and he kind of does the same thing with his installations and his art and his comics as well. It's about filling the page up with all this detail and pattern and stuff, which is
I like it.
It's amazing to look at.
David, you should check it out as a drummer. You might have some thoughts on his comics and drumming styles, whether you'd see any kind of correlation between the two.
What I want to know is whether or not, David, there's a correlation between your comics and your drumming style.
Good question.
Well, if you get a headache when you're reading my comics, there's a correlation.
Fair enough.
This podcast at the moment is actually 50% drummers, so we'd have a strong rhythm section.
Yes. That's
and that's it.
And excellent timing.
Dual drummers. Which notable bands have featured dual drummers?
I seen a band called Sack Trick years ago in Helaman's Umbrella in Glasgow, and it was really, really off the wall. They were just stood right in front of us. It was the first time I'd ever experienced a band like that, and they had 2 drummers. And it was just so loud. I think the guitarist from Robbie Williams' touring band played with him. It was like a sort of him and his pal's side project, you know.
Yeah, that's how you work everything out. Coming out of a Robbie Williams tour, wouldn't it?
Yeah.
I've got some shit to work through. I'm going to need 2 drummers.
Let's go to town, boys.
I'd like to see what his comics are like.
Did you ever hear about the Boredom's drum show that they did, the 77 Boa drums?
Oh, yeah.
They had the 77 drummers in the circle in like a park in New York. And like 77 full drum kits, and they just had the 3 normal drummers from the Boredoms, and then they had the guy I was like directing them all with just hand actions, and it's insane. Just look it up online. It's one of the most full-on sounding things you will ever hear. So it's
basically an orchestra, but entirely of drum kits.
Yeah, exactly.
Nice.
They did 88 the year after as well, I think.
Superb.
Yeah.
I'll just put in a shout for King Crimson.
There you go. 3
when they
drums.
did Thrack with Bill Bruford and Pat Maestretto.
Is that a particular album that they did with a double drummer?
Yeah, Thrack. And boy, it's a racket, I'll tell you. But it's really good.
If you want a couple of two drummer bands or more, Melvins had the two drummers, the Big Business bass player and rhythm and drummer from Big Business. They just joined Dale Crover and Buzz Osborne. Barbaros, a band from Leeds, I think, and they've got two drummers and a synth player, and they had a live visual player for a while. And I've seen them like 3 times just when they tour around, and they're one of the most ridiculous live acts. They wear these full body body suits, like the sort of just one color suits, and they come out and just don't talk ever, and they're really creepy guys, but really.
Are you sure you didn't go to the Blue Man Group by accident?
Man, this is some deep art. God damn.
Cool. Well, before this completely turns into a drumming podcast, let's move on. So, David, the first book we're going to talk about is the one you suggested. So perhaps you could give us a little intro into it and say why you chose it and what you thought about it.
Okay. Well, it's Trashed by Derf, and he has written this fictional story about somebody working on the bin lorries, and I've really liked Derf for many years, since he did his first version of Trashed, which was a kind of a floppy, as they call it, and he also did a self-published version of My Friend Dahmer, which was a 20-odd page comic back then. And I just read those and thought, hey, this guy's good. I enjoyed reading it. And then
So were you aware of his political cartooning and the city?
I was.
His weekly strip?
Yeah, once I was aware of him as being someone to look out for. Funnily enough, it was in the cheapo section of Forbidden Planet, where all the best comics are, where all the good stuff ends up. So I always have a look through, and I saw the City collection by Derf, and I thought, oh, here's Derf again. I'll pick that up. So I enjoyed that. Then he did the musical one.
The punk rock
one. Punk rock. Oh, yeah, and that was really good as well.
Okay. Punk rock in Trailer Parks, I think it's called, isn't it?
Yeah. And all the time along, as I was reading these, I was never hearing anything about Derf anywhere online. It was really odd, because I thought he was right up there with my other favourite guys, Peter Bagg and all these guys, but he was never. Yeah. In fact, there was a point where Paul Gravett, the comics expert guy, was putting together his the world's weirdest comics kind of book, and he was telling me about it, and it was all this weird stuff, and he said, "Oh, and do you know there's a comic about Jeffrey Dahmer? It's so odd." And I said, "Yeah, I've got that." And I remember he looked, and I could see him thinking, "Oh, is it that odd? if this guy sitting in Dundee has picked it up, But then it was, of course, as you all know, he did a bigger version of Dahmer, and that became a really big hit. So Derf's he's on the map now.
Yeah, that was the first I became aware of him. I think was that Dahmer actually borrowed it off John. Prior to that, I think I'd seen his name on John's Facebook feed, and I just assumed he was some kind of meme generator thing, because that's usually what I see in John's Facebook feed, and I couldn't believe that somebody could be called Derf back Derf. But then I was
I remember Facebook were threatening him he must change his name. He's not allowed to be, and in fact I think he did. I think he's John Derf or something now.
He's
they're not accepting that.
Facebook's policy on names, I'll take them to task. I'm very angry about that. But
okay, so anyway, carry on.
The new version of Trashed isn't straightforward. The first one was like a day in the life kind of thing, or straightforward. He was just talking about when he worked there. But now he's created a whole set of characters. So it's fiction. The new one's fiction. And I think also he's updated it. So when he was working there, it was like late 70s or something. But this one's set nowadays. And I think it's... Can I spoil ahead? I thought it was great. I really enjoyed it again.
Yeah, absolutely.
Which I expected to.
Yeah. Did you find that you enjoyed one part of it more than another, because just speaking personally, I was into the story stuff. I was really into it, particularly when you could kind of tell that it was stuff that had come from his personal experience. And that because I think we've all read the floppy version and the newer graphic novel version, but there's obviously like anecdotes that he's taken from life, and those are really great. But I really liked the I guess educational, you could call it for want of a better word, but just stuff when he's talking about the state of rubbish in America. Basically, this is all set in America, and the kind of just the volume and the processes involved with waste. I thought that was really very well put and very well drawn as well. Like really nicely done. What did you think, David?
Yeah, I did think that was good. I liked that as well. As soon as he started doing that, I thought, oh, okay, he's going to fill up some pages with this kind of stuff. But I think he did it really well. And, there were certain bits where he'd show you the guy throwing out the rubbish and then be giving you all this information, and then things were punctuated by... There was one particular example. He was talking about something, and it was, here it is here. Okay, I'll just say page 29. If somebody's got this book,
we'll look it up, page 29.
So it's like panel 2. Yes, have it ready.
Yeah.
And it says, 14.6% of it is food scraps, 13.5% is yard waste, and then the character shouts, assholes,
Yeah.
So I thought he was still punctuating it with the humour. And I thought, it was pretty seamless. I liked it.
Yeah, it was quite seamless actually. I liked it. See with the kind of autobiographical parts, I actually liked them better in the 2002 edition. I thought that they were a wee bit more. Well, they were obviously based. It was less fictionalised, I thought, but you could obviously see where it had led to what he'd done with the new version. And I thought that the drawing styles. I mean, the drawing is beautiful. I read it about 3 times. Just looked at it more intensely than I usually do with a lot of things.
Yeah, there's some really standout panels, like some of the ones, just drawings of bin lorries. Oops, sorry, that was me smashing the mic there.
Yeah.
Drawings of bin lorries, just piles of shit.
Yeah,
like the little pages he has in between chapters, I suppose, where he's got the trash piling up on the can, and that's some really labor-intensive drawing style he's gone for.
Yeah.
I love the way he draws figures as well. Everything's right angles with them.
Yeah. Just those panels at the end of the sort of the bigger edition of it as well. The nice drawings of the trash can and then slightly fuller. That thing was just really nice.
That was a good ending.
Because I read it on I was talking to you about this before, Neil, about the difference between reading it like full pages and with the guided view thing that you can get in Comixology. Because I've had to read it digitally because I haven't bought it yet, but it was really interesting. That ending worked really well on the tablet because you scan through and then it goes.
You couldn't see it coming.
It was nice because it would it whited out and then it would sort of have the bin and then you scan to the next page and it would white out and then you scan back and it did this sort of fading in and out kind of thing and it just worked very nicely that way. It's I can imagine it would be good in the book because I looked as well. It's like full white pages between those developments and stuff like that. So it was a really nice ending. To it.
Yeah, definitely. So, did you have any criticisms of it? Because there's a couple of things I was going to mention, but I just wanted to hear what you guys thought first.
I thought there was quite a lot of with the exposition was a wee bit clumsy in places, but I mean, I'm not here to review this. It sort of took me out a wee bit.
You mean like when the characters were
describing
talking at each other?
Yeah, to describe what was happening.
Yeah, they weren't really.
But then wasn't this not webcomic to begin with?
Yeah, it was. It started as a webcomic.
And maybe if you have to bring folk up to speed, then that was that.
Yeah, to me, I found there's some incidental characters, not the main characters, because they didn't really feel like particularly characterful to me. They kind of just seemed like sort of basically a way for Derf to speak through some characters, which is fair enough because it's based on autobiographical stuff. But some of the more ancillary characters, like Marv, like the dog
Curtis
catcher,
Interruptus,
and Curtis Interruptus, there's some really really great stuff. Like just the way he drew them, the way he described them, talked about them, and like that, the really greasy sort of corrupt guy. He probably was based on a real guy, maybe exaggerated somewhat, but
One I was gutted didn't end up in the main bigger version was the Heat Demon. I really like the Heat Demon in the short one. There's gonna be a hot one out there today, boys. That guy, I wanted him to fall like
wrapped up in all of his clothes.
Yeah.
You're not feeling it.
Oh my.
Yeah.
What did you
so
guys
it's
think
really good
of
stuff.
McGee, by the way? Was it McGee? Is that his name?
I thought he was great. I loved
really
McGee.
Yeah, so me too.
I like the way he left the story, just like got up from the table, ran away down the road, and that was just the last you ever saw of him.
Yeah.
The reasons
also
for
when
it were really sad as well. Like I was very.
Yeah.
It's obviously we're talking about it, but people will have read this hopefully before they do this and stuff. But just it was like he's this really great character and he's really interesting, and then the way he ends like just turns out to be a bit of an arse basically. It's just
bad.
like
Yeah.
it's like oh god. Well, goodbye McGee. Never seen him again.
Yeah,
I loved it as well when he had the half-page pose and he'd, through one thing and another, he ends up standing there, holding the porn mag, and he's got the cowboy boots on and the hat,
Oh yeah.
and just his underwear, and the mayor comes in,
Yeah.
he's just looking like, what?
Just like, oh my god.
Superb. Another thing I thought about kind of his drawing style is it's with this and with Dahmer, it's such a unusual way that he draws figures, but it works so well with these things because they're both obviously very well. They're both disgusting, but in different ways. The kind of the unsettlingness of the Dahmer story, but the grime involved in being a binman just is a perfect fit with his drawing style because everybody just looks like their wits end at every moment, even when they're just like sitting on the side of a lawyer. They just everything is quite extreme the way he draws the figures, and I think that's a really good fit for the stories he's telling. And also I love, well, in one he kind of he did it twice in the graphic novel. In the first book it's just collecting all the dog poo bags,
oh my god,
and then the way that they all just like swell up, and he's got a panel
they're fit to burst.
to them ready to burst, and then they go, and then he has his cake and eats it because he does it with nappies and dog poo bags in the second one, two times. But I suppose it's such a good gag having this bin lawyer just scraping all this shit, and then it's worth doing it twice.
I love all that stuff about the just get some old newspapers to put on top of this, and we'll just churn it through a bit more and stuff. We'll just scrape it out. Like, they're talking about like the trash van like wiping its own arse and stuff.
Yeah.
Oh my god.
It's perfect. Yeah.
But the grime and stuff you're talking about, like I think that's I don't know, it's really interesting in this as well. Just the fact that it kind of gives you an insight into a truly kind of horrible kind of, it's almost like a body horror kind of a job, the way that they've been doing it for so long or such a while that it just like the thing about they keep talking about how nothing phases them anymore. Yeah, it's things like this, and it's the fact that I don't know. It's almost like I kept reading it and thinking about you hear people saying, "Oh, well, skin's waterproof, so that's fine." Yeah. So it's this thing like they've just covered like the characters in it just get absolutely hammered, with falling off of vans, getting hit by things, chased by dogs, covered in like the worst things you could imagine and stuff like like the exploding like diapers all over them and stuff like this, and it's just
it does not make you want to be a binman. That's for sure.
No.
And that little statistic about I think it was top 5 most dangerous occupations in the US. Binman's up there with getting scraped off the side of a lorry and getting your hand pulled into a chipper and all sorts of stuff. It's just nasty. But luckily we don't have to face that. Other people are right
It's
there.
good the way they found the beauty in their job. There was a couple of scenes where he was like, "Look at that shiny can." It's indescribably beautiful, and you felt like he really meant it, So they were finding, and also throwing they threw the piano in the back, and it was all smashing up, and he said it's horrifyingly beautiful.
That was a
Concerto in Trash Minor.
Yeah.
No, that
exactly.
It's really, I don't know, it's like, it's a really nice analysis of how the worst job can possibly be made better with like the good people to work with.
Yeah, I suppose you find your comrades, whatever you're doing, don't you? If you have other people to share it with, you kind of have a solidarity amongst.
The one thing as well that I felt about it was he wasn't looking for sympathy. Like if somebody had this kind of crappy job, they might be looking for a bit of a pity vote or something.
Look how hard I had it.
But I didn't get the sense he was doing that as well. He was just telling stories based on that, and it was kind of humble.
Yeah, he says at one point, doesn't he, that like trash made him a man.
Yeah.
Basically, he went in a boy and he came out a man.
Yeah.
After going through all the grime and the dirt, it spurred him on to to not want to do that anymore. I guess it's kind of an optimistic way of looking at it.
It's just a really good look at the other side of the kind of jobs that you don't normally think about. Like, I worked for a while as a AV tech with Diamond, like AV laboring and stuff like that. And it's the stuff you don't think about outside of the event. Like, I kept thinking about the way that they come along and they pick up the trash while everyone's at work and things like this. It's that same kind of thing where you go to an event and you see everything and the stage is set up and the band plays and all this kind of stuff, and you don't think about after you've all gone home and stuff like that, people come in and dismantle it all, put it in a van and stuff like that. And it's just that the other side, like
seen behind the curtain, really, isn't it? Yeah, it's good. Any comic which depicts somebody just doing their job, it's always going to be pleasurable to me. I think, like, I don't want to see somebody doing heroics all the time. It gets boring after a while. But just somebody just doing their job, even if they're not doing it particularly well, even if they're just competently, is a pleasure to watch or to read about. I like that kind of stuff.
One thing as well one thing that I felt as well is, the message about how much stuff we throw away and where it all ends up and how dangerous it is actually left me feeling a little bit scared. I was sort of, it's a bit eye-opening to think about that.
Obviously it's set in North America where they've got much vaster amounts of land, so it's not been such a pressing issue in terms of moving away from landfills. But I'm not naive enough to think that we don't have landfills right here in Scotland that are just having the exact same problems. So
well, that one at the M74 in Glasgow, and it stinks when you go by. I think at the M73 cut off, there's one to the left there. It just smells like.
Yeah, the idea of it it's like the liquid that seeks out of it, like this toxic mix of the leachate, and like the very minimal amounts of protection that are put in. And like that's only the ones that have been started before the regulations came in. There's countless ones out there that have had no protection whatsoever, and they're just buried over. I found it quite sinister when he was describing like these landfills that have been filled up, not used anymore. They get grassed over. So they just look like kind of rolling hills, but there's no birds, there's no wildlife. Nothing is going to live there because they can all sense the sort of seething mass of poisonous waste that's just sitting on the ground. I found that quite
talking about the
horrific.
So talking about the pipes that came up out the ground, isn't that one of them out of Dundee? Like if you're on the train going down to Edinburgh, there's like this area you go past and it's got all these hills, but it's got the black pipes sticking up out of there as well. And like I never knew what those were, but I think they could possibly be, this like
potentially
reformed trash site.
Yeah, I don't know about it. I don't know.
Is that down by the riverside?
Yeah, it's like on the other side, like over like if you're looking out over the waterfront from Dundee, it's like on the other side off to the right, like where the train goes out on the side of the train bridge and stuff like that. But
no, I'm not sure.
Yeah,
but
I know there's a sort of sewage work or something down by in the what is it called, Riverside Drive, on the way out to.
Oh yeah.
I suppose that's the point, though. Is you don't know where they are. Like we're completely oblivious to where our waste goes. Even when it comes to recycling, he touches on that in the book a little bit. I do my recycling. I wash out my bottles and jars, and but then I just put them in a thing, and I don't know where they go after that. That somebody's going to be doing something good with them, but
that sort of inbuilt lifespan of things where you have to replace it after 10 years. When he talks about things like that is sort of, he says about, so the stuff has a lifespan, it breaks, you throw it away, you buy a new one, but that means that jobs are created to make the products, and then so people have money, and then it's like a cycle that's never ending.
It's very telling as well when he was talking about how the biggest export from America is rubbish. So you think, well, it's not. This isn't going to stop. They need this. This is the main part of the economy.
There's a invested interest in that cycle continuing for sure.
Well, that's something that comes up in both, like a lot of Dama's work as well as this. He seems to kind of be commenting on the sort of selfishness or short-sightedness of people in a lot of ways. The fact they don't know where their trash goes, and the willingness that people have to let things sort of be overlooked. Like it's in Dahmer as well about the fact that there's all these people who could have done something but they didn't, and then there's in this one as well. Like in the short one, I was noticing how it started off how they hated the job and they hated having things made tough for them, but then at the end of it, they make it as tough for the people who replace them as it was for them. And then there's this cycle of like people throwing stuff out but not wanting to not wanting to change the way that they work, because he's talking about like plastic water bottles. Like, how likely are you to give up that convenience of being able to have water out the bottle right there and so on? So it's just that was something I noticed that pops up sort of through his work, is this idea of people overlooking things a lot as well.
Yeah,
which is...
without it being overtly political as well, I suppose. Like, he's just kind of mentioning it, and then he's just leaving it there for you to make the connection. You know, he's not haranguing the reader.
Yeah.
It's not telling them. Yeah, it's not preachy at all. It's just like,
just telling
this is the state. Are you okay with this? Because I'm not okay with it. Basically, is what he says.
Well, that was in the Inkstuds interview as well, when he's talking about how he used to be really political with like his the City comic and things like this, which there was a wee shout out to at the beginning of Dama, like the shot of his bedroom. It's got a big poster for the City on it. I noticed.
Oh, really? I never noticed that.
But he talks about how he used to be really angry and fired up and political, and then as he's got older, he's just kind of like, you know, he's got no fight necessarily, and it's like there's so many other people doing it that just send it out there, and then I'll just kind of talk about what I find bad, and then see if other people agree. In a way. Yeah.
So, well, cool. It sounds like everybody's pretty positive on the old trashed by Derf there. So thanks for the suggestion, David. That was a good one. Any closing comments?
Yeah, I've got something that it made me think of, and it's not really relevant, but there was one night quite a few years ago. I was out and I was in Glasgow, and it was sort of 4 o'clock. Everyone's piled out the clubs, that kind of thing, waiting for buses down the road, and a bin truck goes down Union Street, and in the back of it there was a guy sort of hanging off it, just a punter who'd come out of the club, and he climbed into the back of this thing, and it was going speeding down Union Street, and everybody, there was like a chorus, like a big kind of Mexican wave, but with voices of everyone cheering him, and he was standing climbing up the ladder at the side, and then he jumped in the hopper part. Was it called the hopper?
Yeah, the collect where he collects all the stuff.
Yeah, and then he was like, he shouted something daft, like, you know, I'm getting a free lift home or something like that, and so it made me think about that, which is a bit stupid. But
I suppose we all see the bin lorry as like our collective ownership. Like we all own the bin lorry. It's ours really.
There was one thing reading it, I kept noticing, and I was wondering if it was going to change. The bin guys would pick up the can and throw it in, and I thought, well, they're not like that here anymore.
Yeah, I know.
They just clip them on and it does it, and it made me think, is the UK ahead of USA in garbage disposal?
Well, it's funny because
technology.
There was actually sort of.
I did actually think that.
A bit of pride in the old the UK infrastructure there. That's good to know.
I mean, I listened to the Inkstuds interview with him as well, and he said that he'd obviously done a lot of research, which he talked about in that. But I did feel like I sort of had the same question as you, because, you know, obviously we clip the wheelie bins on here, and, you know, and I felt like there was a sort of discrepancy between what had happened in the 70s or 80s when it was he'd been a binman to what it is like now.
Actually, there was a few instances where you could kind of tell he was writing about things that had happened to him in the 70s and then updating it. So they went into the store and there was a comic spinner rack. So he must have saw that in the 70s, and then he wrote something like, must be the only one left. Or something. And then somebody else collected 8-track tapes. And then somebody said, I don't know why you're still collecting those, or something like that. So that was interesting.
That was your, I don't know, your boy Maggie as well. The fact that he collected all those 8-tracks and the old stuff that was out there, like I don't know, link to the nostalgic past. Like Maggie in the house is maybe like, I don't know where he comes from, almost like all that stuff he's interested in.
Anyway, let's take a little break there, and then we'll come back.
Is there anyone still here?
Okay, welcome back. So the next book we're going to talk about has been suggested by John, so I'm going to let him introduce it for us.
Well, you guys came and asked me to come on to this, and it was like, you know, kind of a nerd's dream come true. Like, you get to get other people to read a particular comic and talk about it a bit. So I was totally kicking myself thinking about what I was going to get you guys to read, because there's so many things that I wanted to. But I don't know why. I wanted to do something that I've just really enjoyed recently as well. And I picked The Fiction by Curt, Pires and David Rubin, which I was actually going to maybe think of doing... what was it called? Battling Boy by... David Rubin did some of the comic stuff for Battling Boy later on, but The Fiction, I just bought the first issue randomly, and I don't know, I just liked the artwork on the front, and I didn't think I'd like it as much, and then I read the first one, and for some reason I just really, really got into it. Like, it's just a really nice. I really like the pace and everything. And the more I've read it, the reason I like it so much is because the more I read it, the more I pick up from it every time. Like, it's one of these books where every single thing in it means something else or has a deeper meaning or something else going on as well. And there's lots of recurring themes through it as well, like constantly breaking the fourth wall. Like, the fact the whole thing is about how fiction takes you out of reality, and the story in this being that people who read this book are literally taken to a alternate world where the reality, they completely detach from reality and end up in this other world that they have to like fight their way out of and stuff. It's not a new idea or anything, but just, I don't know, there's something really, really good about that I've really enjoyed. And it constantly makes references to breaking the fourth wall. Like, the book that they read at the beginning is actually sounding out what's going on in the panel. So it's describing what you're reading at the time you're looking at it. And certain characters, like right at the end, there's the point where it sort of breaks that point that you and the book are in different realities and so on, which is very interesting. I don't know.
So can you answer something for me, John?
Yeah.
Is that the end of the story of the fiction, or is this like, is there more of it to come? Or
that's the end of it. It was just 4 issues. It's a really strange, like, abrupt ending, isn't it?
Yeah, because I had throughout. Well, I mean, first of all, I enjoyed it, but with some reservations, I suppose.
Yeah.
One of which being, I wasn't sure if the 4 issues were going to be enough to tell the story that they were trying to tell. Yeah. And having read the 4 issues, I still don't think that they had enough time, or not that they didn't have enough time in the 4 issues, because there's a lot of pages, but that they didn't tell the whole story that they wanted to.
Well, no, I would agree with you in a lot of ways. Like, this is the thing. I don't know. I just picked it because it was. I think it's a book that has a lot of flaws to it. Like, they've gone into a 4-issue run of a book which. They've come into a short, like, limited space with really big ideas, I think. So it's this thing that they haven't been able to really tell the story properly. They've tried, they've hinted at a lot of things, but for some reason it all, I don't know. It was just a book really that got me thinking a lot more than actually. I don't know.
Yeah, I can see that. The problem I had with it was I wanted them to go more in, like, they kind of created this meta-fictional world for a thing to call it, where. From my takeaway from the book was that all fiction seemed to spring from this kind of communal well that they were accessing, which is a cool idea. Kind of something that's been explored before in other comics, like in Alan Moore and some of his work in Gaiman and these kind of guys, but in a different way. But having set up that idea, they then didn't really explore it very much. It was a lot of cool looking stuff.
Yeah,
and I wanted them to go further into that and kind of talk more about what was happening. Like, there'd be characters in the background that were interesting, and even the kind of the big bad thing.
Yeah, the evil guy and all that.
I know. I don't want them just to be pages of exposition, but I just want a little bit of context for what's going on. It doesn't have to be particularly rooted in reality, because obviously they've gone beyond reality, but I just want them to explore that idea further than they actually ended up doing in the comic.
Well, I think the thing I actually quite liked this about it, which was that, I don't know, the book's all about, I don't know, it feels kind of like unbridled imagination a little bit. Like, so some things, I don't know, some of the pictures that they've laid out and the way it's carrying on, and the fact that it leaves so many gaps and asks so many questions, I kind of like that you have to, like, answer them yourself a bit. It kind of gives suggestions of what each character is and what each character is doing, and so why they're doing it and so on. But I keep thinking back to this quote about the most perfect things are in the mind as opposed to reality. Like, something you imagine will always be better than what's actually there, and so on. I think that's it. Just got my imagination going a bit. And but I know what you mean. It is very true that there's still a lot missing from it. But I like the fact that every time you read it, you pick up something else. Like.
That's a good point. I've only actually read it through the once so far, so perhaps on a rereading, it would give more of what I'm looking for.
But there's loads, because the last image in it is the infinity symbol as well. So it's a comic that's designed to be reread over and over and over again in sequence, I think. So it's the fact you go back, and within the first 3 or 4 pages, there's everything. So there's references to what happens later on, like Tsui's, Tsui's his dad. Tsang is, when they go into the imaginary world, his shadow in all of the pictures is the evil creature's like outline and things like this. So there's this suggestion, and in his father as well, the suggestion of sort of the twisted version of him through the wine glass that Max's dad is drinking from, George is drinking from as well, and things like this.
Yeah. That's you've obviously picked up a lot of these incidental details, which only on the first time through I haven't been able to capture. So it's probably worth me going back and looking at some of these things.
Yeah, some of the stuff like we were talking about before we started talking about Trashed as well, about time in panels and time in comics and stuff. I like the way that Rubin does that in this comic. The way that he depicts. You've got these kids who at the beginning, and then something horrible happens. Tsang goes missing, and they all have to deal with it. And then as a snapshot of who they are now, it gives you the full page of just a day in the life kind of thing. So you've got Cassie waking up, going to work, getting the answer, doing her work and being like, well done, you've managed to not screw up again, and then just dancing and passing out and stuff. Whereas you've got Max with this kind of 9-to-5 job where he just goes out, gets hammered, and since he's a good looking guy, he hooks up with people every night and stuff. And I just really like those pages, the way there's almost no text in it as well, but it does just give you a really good snapshot of who these people have turned into from the children that they were.
Yeah. Just to pick up on what Neil was saying there before we move on to something else, what happened, what I was saying was that it sort of highlights the difference between this comic is a mini-series released by one of the kind of monthly publishers, if you see what I mean, and Trashed is something, I know it was a web comic, but it's something that's more like a kind of, it can be as indulgent or as long or as anything as the author is sort of saying.
Yeah.
Obviously, he's got responsibilities to his editor and stuff like that. Derf, that is. But I think that maybe because maybe when this idea was pitched, it would have been a bit more in depth or whatever, and then they say, well, how many? Is it going to be 6 issues? And then they're saying, well, we're only going to give you 4. Yeah. So then it's considerations like that. Things that we don't really have to, that we maybe don't have privy to the knowledge, can make a difference in how you tell the story as well. So it's all a compromise game, but I thought it was worth mentioning that. So.
But I just think, obviously, I don't know the ins and outs of the publishing thing, but and I guess when you've got the opportunity to go with a big publisher, you probably are. But it just makes me question whether this story was ideally suited to the monthly issue format. Like from what John is saying, it sounds like you think that. That they did think that, and they're trying to play with that idea of looking back to a previous issue and having it loop together. But I don't know if it was completely successful for me.
I don't know if that's the thing. I don't know if they actually went in with that intention. Is the thing they might have gone in with the intention of it being 6 issues or so. Because I have to say that I really was on the fence about it as well, being a Boom Studios like production, because I really don't like Boom as a publisher. They release a lot of titles that I just can't get behind. Like, I just really don't like them. But this one in particular is just because I liked the artwork, and then it turned out it was by some, like, I just saw it and I'd forgotten that it was by this guy who I'd actually got some stuff by before. And so I can imagine there would be a bit behind the scenes. It does have this feeling of a story which has been cut down by publisher requirements, and maybe they've gone in with these big ideas and the publisher said, yeah, great, let's do it, and then they've been like, oh wait, no, we kind of need to dial back a bit, you need to do it in this time. And that could be why I think they always had the Infinity there before, but it feels like it doesn't really, it's not very, I don't know, it sounds bad, it's not really a very satisfying read on first hit, I don't think.
Well, it's interesting. I mean, and don't get me wrong, I wasn't trying to say anything about what their intentions were. I was just trying to sort of point out the difference between the two styles there. But when you first suggested this book, I kind of wasn't really that interested in it. But I felt like that was actually the value of what it is we're trying to do, because as a comic collective, we do have these kind of conversations when we meet up, and so to have a sort of book club in a way to chat about things and to sort of be exposed to new things, or be exposed to something that you wouldn't normally pick up or whatever, is part of the thing. And I'm not down in that in any way whatsoever. But when I read the first issue, the way I approached this, I read the first issue, and I was kind of like, because I was going to do this podcast and I've got to read the next 3. If I was just doing it, I might not have. But I'm kind of glad that I did stick with it, because then I read the other 3 kind of in quick succession after it. And then I had another look at it actually today, this morning, because I'd read the the old Trash and then the new Trash I must have read about 5 times.
Yeah.
But I wanted to give that, and I did have a look through it today, and I noticed some of the things that you were talking about there, and I certainly felt like with a little bit of prior knowledge, I did get more out of it.
Yeah.
But sometimes I just pick up these things, and it's entertaining, like for the time that I read it, and then I don't really think much beyond it, and I haven't really gone back to it apart from because of this.
What about you, David? What were your thoughts on the fiction?
It didn't really grab me, I didn't really get into it. I don't think I would have went near it with a barge pole if I hadn't been doing it for this podcast. But I think it did look nice. Really, my immediate thought was it's like Paul Pope, the artwork.
Yeah.
It seems to be a bit of an influence on it. Kind of scratchy line work.
Which is a funny link because Paul Pope was doing he was writing Battling Boy. He drew Battling Boy originally. He wrote Battling Boy as well, and then David Rubin drew it afterwards as well. So
there was, as I was looking through, there was certain things that were just annoying me. Sorry to be nasty, but little things that weren't clear just on first reading. Like there's a little panel near the start where, it's a really petty thing, but Sang is that he's looking through the books and they're kind of floating behind him, and I thought, are they float? Is he magic? Is he making them float, or is he just throwing them behind him? It's like I immediately felt like we're entering immediately into some magic fantasy.
Well, then eventually,
thing here.
4 panels later, then they are actually entering some kind of stuff. So
yeah.
I can see how that would be confusing.
We go, And I thought
David,
the dialogue was.
See in the next page, they're all levitating off the ground, and it is magic. Clearly, it's magic. Did you have a problem with that part?
No, I got that.
Sorry. Sorry, David.
So you're going to say something about the dialogue there?
Yeah, I thought the way they were talking, it wasn't. They don't have to be realistic talking, but it just seemed like there were a bunch of characters in a book talking to each other to me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Which they were, to be fair.
Yeah, it was one of these books that you quickly realised, okay, this is a kind of a writer talking about writing,
Yeah.
And, it's kind of I think a lot of these people have grown up reading Grant Morrison, and now they're going to have a go at it kind of thing, which maybe isn't true.
Yeah.
But that's my prejudice against it. It's like, here we go, prepare to be impressed by something that's not really explained to you. Are you clever enough to understand this kind of thing?
Yeah.
And I'm like,
any plot holes are kind of.
That must be your fault. You never thought about it properly.
Imagination can be anything. So and it's your
imagination. It actually came right at the end. I got to the point where there's the old. I think John mentioned that there's the old guy's in the bar, and he turns and he says, "Yes, I can see you." And I just thought, no, you can't.
No. But the thing
wasn't buying it. I wasn't buying the whole premise of the thing. You can't see me. This is just gobbledygook.
But I'm very happy.
But hey, it looks nice. But it looks like Paul Pope.
But I'm happy you mentioned Grant Morrison because it's like there are a lot of links to his theories about imagination and creation and sort of other dimensions and other realities and things like this. And it's like somebody's taken some of the stuff that he's looking at about, anything that you write down or you create actually creates another version of this reality somewhere else. And so I just like the idea that it's that Morrison idea that, well, it's like in Multiversity, the way that all these other universes are working with each other and they're actually sort of communicating between universes, and the way that they see each other is through the comics and so on. And I like the fact that it's like got 3 layers. It's got me reading the comic, and then it's got them reading the books in the comic, and those 2 barriers between us, them, and then the reality that they go into are broken down sort of consistently throughout the book. So
yeah, I know what you mean. I think I might have been with you, David, that I had this conversation, but I feel like you read one Grant Morrison comic and it's amazing, and then you read another one and it's not amazing, and then you read another one and it's just another Grant Morrison comic, and then I guess that has a knock-on effect with something that's so clearly inspired like this. Is that it's a neat trick, but it's got diminishing returns.
I don't even remember.
Yeah, I think there is a worth to that. I mean,
Yeah.
it's definitely an interesting idea.
Yeah.
But I don't want to spend, 40 years reading variations on that one idea. To me, there was so much more of worth in Trashed to me than there was in this comic.
Yeah.
I mean, it's obviously a very different thing, but to my taste, I liked Trash better than.
But this.
So you like the one that you picked?
Yes, funnily enough.
But this is interesting because I think this comic kind of, I don't know, I noticed there's a difference between the two choices that we've got here as well. I think has much more of a link between people who, I don't know, it's kind of comics that you buy, there's the things that are either made up or there's the factual things. So it's either
That's
comics
true. David hates anything that's made up. He does not enjoy
Just
made up stories.
He loves Star Wars.
Yeah, which is true. It was just based a long
But
time
that's
ago.
real, isn't it?
Yeah, it was just a long time ago.
Long time ago. But I'm just thinking about the fact that you can have
Historical fiction.
Yeah. You can have, I don't know, as time's gone on, I like comics that have less and less rules to them, it seems. And like realities that have less rules. And it does, because when I first started reading comics, there was always this feeling that I didn't know what was going on. Like you read them and it felt like you had to know about 400 issues beforehand in order to be able to understand what's going on at that one point. And I think I just over time started to like that. And that fact that you do have to kind of, you're thrown into this weird situation and you have to like fight against it to kind of understand what's going on. Like I do love a good comic which just has it all in front of you as well. And I really like books that, like I'm a huge fan of just self-contained wee stories as well, which is why I was interested in this one being a short one. Like I thought it was going to go on for much, much longer. And I think that's something that threw me as well. I was buying it monthly when it came out, and then it was just like end of story. Like issue 4 came out and it was just like the infinity symbol in the end, and it was like, oh my god, what the hell? It was like Ordinary by Rob Williams and Disraeli as well, that they just had these 3 issues, and it was such a great story, and it was amazing. Then all of a sudden it just kind of goes, the end out of nowhere, and it totally throws you. And Trillium did it a little bit as well, but like halfway through, just I don't know. I think it's like the rug gets pulled out from you a little bit. You're not expecting the end as well.
So maybe that's something to do with what Stuart was saying about the kind of economics of monthly issues or bi-weekly issues or whatever this was.
Yeah.
In that it's tied to the whether somebody's actually going to buy this or not, and if
it's also a stylistic choice, isn't it?
Yeah, that's true. But if they're trying to do something,
it's like we're not going to give you a pat ending. It's like no. We're going to give you a vague ending.
Yeah.
And then you have to take that away with you and think about it.
A pat ending would have been equally frustrating to me, because it wasn't that the ending was bad. It was just that it kind of seemed to stop, even though it had 2 epilogues, which I thought was weird. It still seemed to end. It seemed to end before the story was. And by this point, I've already read 3 other issues, and I'm kind of. I've got some issues. I've got some problems with it, but still, I'm invested in the story, and I want to see a little bit more about what goes on with this.
Talking about the epilogue, I wanted to ask you guys.
Yeah.
Was it the end of number 3?
Mm-hmm.
And there's like this scene, and it's these people, and they're naked on the hill. I want you right now.
Yeah. And it's
the snake, and
mm-hmm.
Yeah, I missed something because I've no idea what really that had to do with anything. So can anybody
bit, I'm still kind of like, the more I read it, the more I'm trying to figure out sort of what that does as well. And I think it might be that it's Tsang's father who's been there before, because there's always this suggestion throughout the book that their parents have been there already. Like Max's father found the gold being at the campfire when he was with Max when they were like teenagers or something, and then Tsang's father's already infected with whatever darkness is there at the beginning of the book, like the shot through the wine glass and things like this. So I think that it's meant to be a shot of something that's happened before, something that's happened previously, but it doesn't really, that is one thing that's always I've gone to, and it's like, this really doesn't have any context and it doesn't really suggest what's going on, and that's one bit that, I have to say it's a bit, not really sure where.
On the one hand, you could say it was bold by the creators of the comic to put stuff in which are going to require repeated readings, but at the same time, it's kind of a lot to ask for people to reread a comic again and again because they didn't understand it. You know what I mean?
Yeah. If I've ever read it again and again because they enjoyed it. Yeah,
exactly. Any comic I've read more than once is because I've enjoyed it and I wanted to read it again because I wanted to get even more out of it. It's never been a case of, I need to work this out. I kind of put that
Well,
at the feet of the creators as a favor rather than a choice. But that's just me being unsympathetic to them.
Well, yeah, but well, this is what was I going to say? It's I don't know. I think it's a different experience the way that we read it as well. The way that sort of reading it all as a oneer, like when I was reading it, like because I was reading it monthly at the time, and I kind of came across it unexpectedly and things like this. So this could be it. That maybe it was just a particular time and place kind of thing that I just started reading it, and then I don't know. It was at the end of each one I had questions, and then I kept going back, and I'd be like, right, I feel like I was reading it, and this is at first I read the first one, I kind of felt, it's nothing special, but there's a lot of extra stuff going on, and I want to find out what that is, and it kind of turned into this puzzle kind of thing where you're going back and I want to figure out what that means.
I suppose you're right. Like you've had a very different experience in reading this comic than the rest of us, in that we've just read it kind of. I assume, David, you did the same. Just read them.
Yeah, I read them all together
as a complete story.
Yeah.
And then. But to have that month's break, perhaps you're right. Perhaps you'd go back over the one issue until the next one comes out and kind of pick up a few more, more kind of familiarized with the content of each episode, and then you'd be starting to make those links together. So perhaps it's a bit harsh to judge it as a graphic novel when it wasn't written as a graphic novel. It was written as a monthly thing.
But this isn't the first time that I've had a sort of fatigue with the serialization of something, because quite a few years ago when I used to work in a comic shop, I'd get quite a lot of stuff in, or we would get all the stuff in, and I'd pick up some things. And sometimes, like when there's a story that goes on, like the one, I can't really think of any examples, but on a monthly series like, say, Batman, like one of the big mainstream DC, Marvel titles, whatever one you want, when there's a story that runs on for, 6 months or something like that, I'm kind of a bit jaded by the time it gets to any sort of sense of conclusion. And maybe even The Walking Dead, for example, which I still pick up sometimes. But I feel like that kind of thing, when it's coming out in that sense, that maybe a two-parter, maybe something like that, but especially with some of the scheduling as well, these things, what it's like. You're talking at the top there, John, about the shipping of what was that comic you were talking about?
Like the Image comics, like Nowhere Men making overseas and things.
Like that. So it's kind of like, I think that fatigue that I was experiencing, I can imagine it's a complicated kind of dynamic within it all. But I much prefer to sit down and, like, I'm looking at Watchmen here because we've got a copy of Watchmen sitting on the desk, and that would 12 issues to begin with, but I've only ever read it as the collected trade. And so I wonder how, obviously I've not read it in one sit. Well, I don't think I've read it in one sitting, but I don't know, there's just I just feel like that's my main sort of thing that I took away from it. I was just kind of like, I don't know how I would have kept up with this if it was going on for 4 months, Well,
it's interesting, like, that's something interesting I picked up from Trashed as well, talking about Derf, like just the different ways that people consume comics now as well. Like he started off being a newspaper sort of Sunday strips artist, and he did that for a long time, and then he started he was doing serialized versions of that, and then he got on and made, I don't think he's ever done the monthly thing, but there's the way you can read it monthly where a story develops gradually over time. And then you've got the full graphic novel, which just goes straight to collection. Then you've got the webcomic stuff, which you get some people do it a page a day and things like this. And
which I believe is how Trashed started out.
Yeah, that was a webcomic.
Yeah,
or at least this version of Trash started out. Maybe after the floppy, he reworked it and came onto the webcomic. But
it's very interesting the way that different, I don't know, just the different reading experiences can affect the way that the success or non-success of a story as well is interesting. So you can read something and, like Watchmen, for example, I read it the first time and I couldn't get through it. I was like probably about a third of the way through, and I was like, this is so dense. And because this is when I was like, I hadn't really read much more difficult stuff. I don't know. I was reading Prophet, and I was into the just fighting comics and stuff like this, and really into that. And then you read something like this, and it's like there's all this writing in between the issues, and what's going on, and there's all this extra stuff. But then, I don't know, I think I sort of made this conscious decision to just be like, right, I'm going to read this. And I sat down and got through it all in like one go, just totally blitzed it. And like, I love it to bits now, because it's another one that every time you read it, you get so much more from it. Like the extra, the emblems of the, like it took me ages. There was one where Night Owl ships flying above the city and the moon and the clouds make the comedian's badge and things like this.
Yeah.
Like there's loads of good stuff in there that that's what I've.
Although to be fair to the fiction, if we start comparing to Watchmen, it's going to be pretty harsh.
But I think that model of sort of the compiling after 6 issues into a trade, I think that after a fashion, these monthly ongoing comics start to write to that model. And then, so, The Walking Dead's a perfect example of that because it comes out in these 6-issue trade collections.
Yep.
And so I kind of feel a bit like it just becomes, it's almost like, are they writing it for that? And I think Kirkman says that he doesn't write for that 6-issue arc kind of thing. Yeah. But, it's kind of, it must be at the back of all the business plan, that's how it's operating.
Walking Dead's a really interesting one for the way it's released after. I just have to say, I think I've used the word interesting about 1 million times in this thing. But
this is an interesting podcast.
Do you know what I find? See, the thing that I'm finding most sort of curious about The Walking Dead in particular, it's the dual continuity that exists. So you've got the TV show and the continuity that exists there, and the same thing's happening with.
Actually, it's triple because it's a computer game.
Of course.
Episodically.
And there's the Fear the Walking Dead as well, with the other experience of the same world by other people and things like this, which is mental.
But with that sort of thing, I'm interested in how these things become like a comic is adapted into a television show, for example. I'm quite interested in that, and just how you would adapt anything. And now that there's multiple continuities running, it's something that's not really, you maybe had book into film, and then something like 2001: A Space Odyssey, which maybe was made concurrently with the film by the time they got to the end of it, as far as I believe. And then something like just a wild adaptation like Jaws, which is another favourite of mine, where it goes into this kind of monster film, but it was a sort of thriller kind of type thing, and excuse me, in the book. But that's the sort of, I think that it's a really curious kind of state of affairs to have all these certain different sort of continuities existing at once.
Well, there's I've started watching Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. recently as well, and I've just gone completely arse over tit for it for some reason, because in the second season there's all this stuff happening. Like, well, that's one as well. It's multiple. It's kind of different actually. It's multiple viewpoints of the same thing between Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. and the Marvel Cinematic Universe stuff and the Daredevils and Jessica Joneses and stuff like this. And it's the fact that it's all different perspectives of the exact same world. And I think
David, can you sum up for me how you feel about the television adaptations in one word?
Just terrific.
Somehow I don't believe you. Well, just to bring this back to the fiction, as you were talking about, I kind of feel like perhaps whoever wrote this, was it Curt
Pires,
Curt Pires. I feel like Curt Pires could have perhaps written this as a short story on one hand and have it as that, or perhaps if they'd kind of focused much more on the artwork and had it almost entirely wordless, just with a little bit. So they're kind of forcing that issue that you were talking about filling in the gaps and sort of emphasizing the imagination, like one way or the other. I just felt like it kind of landed halfway in between, and it was a little too wordy, while at the same time being a little bit too vague. There
was one bit in this that I really thought was effective, and so I thought I better make a note of this because this is positive. I can bring this up. So there was, I think it's in the third. None of these pages are numbered in what I've got here, but it's like our main villain, and he's and
sort of wiggly guy.
Well, they're having a conversation, and I didn't see it before I looked at the page, which I thought was quite good. Suddenly you get to panel 2, and he's had enough, and he just shouts, "Stop them!" I don't know if you know the sequence. I mean. Yeah, and I thought that kind of took me by surprise a bit. So I was just reading the conversation, and then "Stop them!" He'd had enough. Yeah, and then he got blasted away, and I thought that worked pretty well. As you felt the jarring and how angry he was. So.
Yeah, I know what you mean. The panels bleed out to the edge of the pages and everything. It's very visually well. I think. Yeah,
it's nice. It's nicely done.
Yeah.
Aye.
Cool. Well, let's. Sorry, John, to talk over you there, but let's feel like we should sum up our feelings on both these comics we talked about today. So,
cool.
From the general impression, I'd say that Trashed by Derf gets a pretty resounding Treehouse recommendation from all of us. And The Fiction, a somewhat more hesitant recommendation. If you're willing to kind of overlook some gaps, you're kind of in for quite a visual treat, but you might be left a little bit wanting in terms of the ending and the story. But have you guys got any other thoughts you'd like to add to?
No, you've summed it up for me.
That sounds about right.
I can't imagine people reading this and really loving it.
Yeah,
I can see why they would, because there's lots there.
Yeah.
John, I understand. There's some character stuff that it kind of reminded me of Jack Kirby here and there, so I appreciated that as well. That was nice. The epilogue on issue 1, the guy at the end, that weirdo.
that
I don't know who anybody is in this comic. I don't know what's going on in this comic, but there's a guy that looks like a Jack Kirby drawing at the end of issue 1, and I thought, oh, there you go, Jack Kirby.
I think that, John, you've got an enthusiasm for comics that. Remember when we were down at Thought Bubble?
Oh yeah.
And we were all joking about how you literally bought one of everything that was going. And you really do. And I think that's great. And I can see that in how you go about your comicking, for want of a different.
For one of an actual word.
Yeah, for one of an actual word.
Yeah.
And so I think that for me, my interest in comics, I'm much more interested in the autobiographical stuff. And I don't know how that was a comparison to those two things, but
it's true. It's like I was saying before. Like I don't know. I think the kind of comics I like have become. I've backed myself into this corner where I just really like the kind of most, I don't know, almost surrealist or Dadaist and these kinds of. You don't really understand what's going on, but you have to figure out what's happening kind of comics, which is very hardcore.
It's good to have an interest, and that is certainly going to lead you down some interesting paths for sure.
Yeah.
I've got enough.
Speaking of Jack Kirby, there's plenty
in
Jack Kirby's back catalogue that'll take you down a real psychedelic.
That's the one.
Twisting pathway. So
that's
where you and David, the Venn diagram of your interests is completely overlapping.
I wanted to ask another question.
Go for it.
To anybody that might have an answer. There's this chess thing going on throughout this.
Yeah.
So our big main characters are playing chess,
Mm-hmm.
and it looks like the bad guy with the teeth wins.
Yeah.
That was my take on it. Is that what you thought?
Well, that's what I see. He says checkmate, and then he says, "I've got you." So that all seems to say that he's won. But there's no.
I've got a theory about what this. I don't know. There's a lot of themes all the way through it.
Lay it on us, John. Lay it on us.
Right.
Give us a proper theory.
Well, there's a bunch of stuff in here, like a bunch of common themes which go on all the way through the book about like. Where have I got it written down here? Just trying to find the thing I did again. Yeah, there's this idea of escapism, the escapism from reality into imagination, which I think I was talking to you guys at the beginning. I listened to World of Pure Imagination from Charlie and the Chocolate Factory again, and how it's such a beautiful but sad song about the positives of, disconnecting, but it's at a cost kind of thing. So there's this escapism issues. There's this the inability or struggle to cope with reality. There's sort of parental involvement on people and things like this. But more than anything, I think that this light versus dark theme all the way through, you've got the gold being and you've got the dark being, and it's the fact that this stuff is, I don't think it's that anyone's necessarily been infected. There's this thing that it's in them already. So Tsang's father's got it there already, whereas Max's father's got it a bit as well. And it's about this, he's got his drinking problem, which is how he's able to kind of deal with this escapism in a way that he's been there, and he sort of uses drinks and drugs to get through there as well, which I think could be this, I don't know, discussion about how people are inspired and how people are creative and things like this. But I think the whole point through it is that there's this light versus dark, and there's this, this internal struggle between the good and the bad and the positive and the negative. And this is just a lot of stuff I've been feeling about at the moment, just in terms of, I don't know, there's this dark side to all of us and this positive side to light, so each of us, and it's about this battle between the two and what you do with it yourself. So I think that's what it is through there, and it is kind of a nihilistic look at the end where it's like the darkness wins kind of thing. But
But then again, I suppose if it's got this idea of the infinite loop, then perhaps it's talking about the never-ending struggle of dark and light within all of us. Yeah, which is quite a weighty subject to try and tackle. So I don't blame them for not completely summing it up in, in 4 issues. So
no, it's it's. I'm glad you guys read it. I'm glad you guys sort of you took a chance and you read it on my behalf to be able to talk about this. And it's really nice to just hear just different points of view on it as well. Like, well, I know that. Well, I've got Harry to read it at one point, and she was sort of saying, I'm not really seeing it, not really seeing the point, kind of thing as well. But it's I don't know. It's this very kind of I don't know.
Well, you're holding the torch up for the fictions. Good on you, John. Good on you.
Was it a success? Is there going to be a sequel? Because the old guy at the end, he also says at the bar, I think you've seen enough for now.
Yeah, exactly. I think that was kind of the fiction
coming soon.
Cruise control.
Cool. Well, I think that's maybe a good time to finish up with our discussion of Trashed and the fiction, because I think we've talked a lot about them.
Can I just say sorry that I'd just like to say thanks to you guys for organising this and for
no worries,
getting us on. Well, getting me on and for myself anyway. But thanks for giving us this forum to kind of talk about something that we're interested in as well.
That's great. Well, thank you. I mean, it's going to be an ongoing first episode. Hopefully, it's been interesting to anybody who actually downloads and listens to it. I wanted to ask you guys though, where could people find your own work? Obviously, they can read it in Treehouse, issue 8, coming out next Wednesday, March the 2nd, that is, for anybody listening. But, David, where can people read your comics? Fred Egg,
yeah. Well, I guess if you Google Fred Egg Comics, you'll find it.
You'll find it.
My blog on my website.
And you've also got a webcomic on another website. What's that?
Oh, yeah, Redbird Review are serialising Bell Time.
Excellent.
And I'm doing one part of that every 3 weeks. That's when I'm firing them off.
Amongst all your other prolific comics production, you're currently working on a new issue. Do you want to say anything about that? Or we're going to leave that for people to find out about in the future?
Well, I mean, I've kind of said it's called Zero Sum Bubble Gum. That's the name of it. That'll be out over the summer. So I'm putting stuff together for that.
So keep your eyes out.
Thank you.
Keep your eyes open for that. How about you, John? Where can people see your stuff?
Apart from seeing it in the fine collection of comics at Treehouse, you can get it at bigjohnthebaker.tumblr.com. So John with no H as well, because I'm like that. So, but no, hopefully I'll have another comic for you guys soon, which will be printed with you guys, and then just wherever you can get Treehouse, you'll get my stuff as well.
In your local comics shop, hopefully.
Yes.
In all cities, in all countries in the future. I believe people can read some comics criticism that you've done as well, John. Is that on your blog too?
Yes, that's there. Yeah, I was doing reviews of weekly roundups and things like this, because I'm a weekly buyer and weekly reader and things like this. So there's some on there as well. I really should start it up again. But
as Stuart said, you're enthusiastic in your comicking, so I'm sure we'll have some interest.
Yes.
Great. Like we mentioned before, this is the first edition of this podcast. You'll be able to download it from various places once we got it online. But if you're interested in finding out more about Treehouse, you can visit us on Facebook, which is just facebook.com/treehousecomic. We're on Tumblr, which is treehousecomic.tumblr.com, and we're on Twitter, twitter.com/treehousecomic. And you can reach us at any time. If you want to ask us any questions, comics we've talked about today, or you want us to answer your questions that you have for us, then you can just email us or tweet us. The email is treehousedundee@gmail.com, and you can just tweet us, and sure, I'll answer that because I don't do any Twitter stuff. Or you can message us on Facebook. We'll get to it. But yeah, thanks for listening, everybody, and hopefully we'll see you on the next edition of the Treehouse podcast. Goodbye.